I'm Kathleen McGiveron, and today we're going to talk about the ABCs of pottery, tools and techniques. We're going to go over the terms used in when it comes to pottery or ceramics. So if you're a little bit confused or you're new to pottery and you're hearing people say all these words and you're like, I literally have no idea what they're talking about, we're going to cover those terms so that way you can catch up on some of the jargon. Let's get art-spired. Alright, the first is we're going to start off at tools. So we're going to start off in tools, then we're going to talk about mold making, just some terms that you might hear. Then we're going to talk about wheel throwing specific terms, then we'll talk about hand building specific terms, and then we're going to talk about firing and glazing terms. Not the processes, but we're talking about terms that are used in some of the creating and techniques. Alright, so some of the tools names that you're going to hear. The first is wood tools. These are tools that are extensions of your thumb or fingers. They're made of wood. Alright, you might have metal tools. These are a bit more detail oriented and they're made of metal. Then a common tool that you're going to hear is a loop tool or a metal loop tool. They look like this. They are used for, you could use them for hand building and carving, but primarily they're used for trimming pots. I'll put it against my black shirt. But these are used for trimming pots, the underside. You use them on the outside, or when your pot is upside down, you will trim your pot like that. All right, this one is a sure form. They come in different shapes and sizes. This is a mud tool sure form, and you can carve away at a surface like this to shape your clay if you're hand building. You're also going to have a paddle. This one's homemade. This one's great for hand building to shape your clay like this. I just cut it out, some scrap wood out of with a jigsaw and sanded it. It's really great to have to condense your clay and shape it. You're also going to want to get a wire tool. A wire tool, this is used for cutting mine's really long and huge and heavy duty. Cutting your clay from the clay bag and even off your wheel. That's what that's used. You're also going to want to use get a spray bottle, because spray bottles help moisten your clay without over soaking it. I'm gonna hear needle tool. So that's this guy here. This is a needle tool. You can use it to measure depth of your pot. So you can stick it through the bottom of your pot on a wheel and then put your finger there and lift it up to see how deep that bottom is on your pot, how thick the bottom is. You can use it for cutting, or so when your pot's going around on a wheel and say it's gotten a little uneven, you can use it to cut the extra clay off to get an even rim again. If you're trying to overcorrect things a little, make a correction because it got a little lumpy. Or people use this to score clay. Like I said in my other videos, I don't score clay with a needle tool. Maybe for attaching a handle on a pot because it's a small area. But if you're doing a sculpture, I highly recommend using a fork. A whole bunch of needles. Yeah. Use a fork, otherwise you're going to be out there all day. Alright, some terms you might hear in mold making is like a 2-part mold or a 3-part mold on your plaster mold. That means that it's a mold that has 2 parts or 3 parts. You might hear slip casting. That means that you're going to take your mold, you're going to bind it with a big giant elastic band or like a strap, and then you're going to pour clay slip, which is like very liquid clay, into it. You're going to set a timer for however many minutes, and then you're going to pour out the extra clay out of the mold, and then you're going to see it's going to be left inside is some clay that's already dried and adhered to the walls. Now you let it dry, and then you come back later, you lift it off, and then you pull out your clay form. Now it's already made. And you can do big molds, you can do small molds. That's how your toilet is made. Just saying, most of the things in your house are made through slip casting that you use. That's ceramic that you have bought in, and it comes from a mold through slip casting. Not from a small person scale. These are like done by machines nowadays. They're like these huge warehouses. But anyways, that's true. All right, and then there's also press mold. So you might have a mold where you press the clay into it and then pull it out that way. So you're using the same clay from your bag, but you're pressing in the clay, pulling it out. That's press molding. All right, so let's talk about wheel throwing. So some terms you're gonna hear, you're gonna be wheel throwing. Obviously the wheel you're going to be throwing on the wheel. You're not actually throwing the clay, but you're throwing the clay. You're going to first center the clay. That means that when you put the clay on there, you're going to slap it on. It's going to be going around. It's going to feel like this. Your hands are all going to be all over the place, and you're going to lock in your elbows, and then you're going to center your clay, and it's going to be center when your clay on your wheel is not making your hands move. So your hands are dead still. That means it's perfectly centered with the force of the wheel turning and your pressure of your hands. So if you're getting really good, you can probably center with one hand depending on how many pounds of clay you used. So you center your clay, and now it is perfectly ready to go. It's not all wobbly, so when you pull it, it's going to be nice and even when you make your pots. The next word you might have heard me just use is pulling the clay. So you're going to pull up a wall. So you're going to open your clay pot, and then you're going to basically pinch or pull up, sometimes you might do it like this, pull up the walls, right? You're going to pull up your walls. And then doing it, a few times with slight pinching is going to help push the clay up into a cylindrical shape. So pulling essentially is pinching and pulling up the walls on your pots, holding your breath so you don't make a mistake. All right, your next one is going to be compressing. So you're gonna, when you have your rims done, after every pull, you wanna just slightly push down on the top and compress the rims so that we don't get a weak rim on your pot, and that way the clay stays strong and isn't super diluted. So you wanna compress your rims, just push down lightly on the rim so that way it is compressed and the clay particles are nice and strong. My friend, I have a question for you. What terms are you stuck on or that you hear when it comes to clay or ceramics and you're like, I don't know what that means? Let me know in the comment section below the video and I'll do my best to help you out. 4 is in the hand building section. So when it comes to hand building, one word you might hear, well, you'll hear it in when it comes to wheel throwing as well, is wedging your clay. That means you're basically kneading your clay like you do with pizza dough or whatever, and that's going to help mix the clay. So wedging the clay is going to mix the clay to produce a more consistent or even clay body. So it's not hard in some areas and super wet in others. It's going to create consistency, and it's also going to work out any air bubbles. So that's wedging your clay. Another term you might hear is coil building. So that means you're rolling out coils, like long snakes, coils of clay, and you're assembling them and layering them, and you're building with coils. You might also hear slab building. That means that you're rolling out a flat slab of clay, and you're cutting out pieces, letting them dry just till they're stiff, and then you're standing them up, kind of like how you build concrete buildings. You stand them up, and then you attach them together to create a slab form, so slabs of clay. The other one is pinch hand building method. That means you might have a ball of clay, and you're lightly pinching the clay to make it go up, kind of like when you pull with a wheel. When you pinch it, it's going to make it shoot out, right? So you're going to lightly pinch and pull it up and work your way into thinning out the clay essentially through light pinches. So pinching method of hand building. All right, number 5, we're going to dive in on some firing and glaze terminology. So the first thing is that you have a kiln. That is the device that you fire in. There are a variety of types of kilns. There are raku kilns. Those are more in the ground with actual like sawdust and fire all around it, burning, creating some different effects. There is gas fire kilns. Those are kilns that are like a gas stove, right? They're using gas to fuel the fire. There is, which is why you call, when you're burning, another term, when you're turning on the kiln, you put your clay pieces into a kiln and you turn it on, that process is called firing your clay, because most kilns use fire. Yeah, most kilns use fire. There are more fire-based kilns than there are not. So raku is using fire. Gas kiln has fire warming up and heating up the kiln to a certain temperature. Wood fire kilns are also using fire. You're firing your clay in a wood fire kiln. Now when it is you're heating up with wood, yeah, keeping it hot, getting it hotter, and creating that by burning the wood. Mine is an electric kiln. Most standard kilns inside buildings. The other ones are outside, but an inside kiln would be like an electric kiln. If it plugs into the wall, it's an electric kiln, and it has electric coils around the inside, all throughout it. And those, when you turn your kiln on, they'll heat up, and then over time it'll progressively get hotter and hotter and hotter till it gets to a certain temperature. In clay, in firing, we measure temperature using cones. So if you hear, oh, I'm firing to cone 06, or I'm firing a low temperature clay, I'm firing to cone 6. Cone 06 and cone 6, very different. I have a whole episode about what are cones in ceramics. So make sure you watch it if you're trying to fire a kiln and you have never fired it, you have no idea what cones mean. It's very important that you understand, so check out that episode. What are cones in ceramics? So they look like this. If you're having a kiln that's digital and you've never seen it, you're like, I don't know why it says enter a cone. I just want to know what temperature it is. No, you want to know what cone is. It's like, I still say with my electric kiln that I'm firing my kiln, even though there is no fire. And my husband's like, you're not actually using fire. I'm like, The name is that's the name of the kiln, of what you're doing, the process. But it comes from most kilns using fire to heat it up the kiln. Same with temperature, even though some of the names have disappeared because you don't need it, if you have an electric kiln, because they're all digital nowadays or touchscreen, they still represent kilns. Now mine still represents cones. Mine still uses cones, probably all the wood fire kilns, gas fire kilns. I'm guessing even though they have a pyrometer in there, they're still going to add cones in there to make sure, double check your temperature, because you don't want to overfire. The worst case scenario, bad case scenario, is that it underfires. It did not reach the temperature, so it's slightly brittle. It'll need to be refired. Worst case scenario is it overfires. It means that it went past the maturity of your clay, and now the clay is melting like magma in your kiln. That's worst case scenario. And there's no going back or saving your kiln shelves or your kiln if it gets on the walls. You're done. So do not do that. That's people might still have kilns or cones in there, and I'll talk about how they use witness cones or guide cones to help, which are larger kilns, to reaffirm or double check their temperatures, or to make sure their kilns are firing evenly throughout or accurately firing to temperature. Sometimes you might have a digital kiln, but you still stick in some witness cones just to make sure that that pyrometer and that digital, that's still firing to the actual temperature of your clay. So each of these cones represents a different temperature. There's low fire clay, fires at a lower temperature. There's medium fire clay, which fires at a medium temperature for clay. And there's high fire temperature, which fires at a very, very high temperature. This is a low fire clay. This one is an 05 cone. That means it's in the low fire range. 05, 06, 07, those are low fire. If it is cone 4, cone 5, cone 6, cone 7, that's more of a medium temperature range. Cone 8, cone 9, cone 10, 11, those are all high temperatures. And there is, again, a very big difference between 04, 05, 06 and cone 4, 5, and 6. If you put your low fire clay into and fire it at cone 4 or cone 5 or cone 6, and it was supposed to be fired at cone 04 or 05 or 06, melting pot in your kiln, bye-bye, kiln shelves and everything in there. So these are cones. Again, if you're like, I'm so confused about cones and you want to learn more, I have an entire episode about cones. I'll link to it in the description below the video for that. All right, so we're talking about kiln. That's what fires your stuff. What goes to the kiln? You have kiln shelves. They are shelves or furniture, kiln furniture. So basically kiln shelves are the shelves that you put your shelves for inside of it. But then you also have kiln furniture, and these are different posts. You can buy posts that are ceramic, that are going to withstand whatever temperature you fire your kiln to. And you just put your shelves on top, and then you make another stack throughout your kiln. These are called kiln posts. but they're part of your kiln's furniture, essentially. And they come in all different sizes. So like I have big ones, so I can fit bigger things in here, but you can get them as tiny as that, you know, every inch. There's every inch, every size. So if you're doing pot, like a whole bunch of mugs, and you're a production potter, well, you want to maximize how much you fit in your kiln. So you're only going to get a kiln post that's slightly bigger than the size of your piece, essentially. And then you'll stack up your shelves. All right, the other one is, so when it comes to glaze, we have underglaze. That is pigment that we paint on that goes under your glaze. So you can apply it to bisqueware or to greenware. Oh yeah, I gotta talk about that. There's so much. And then you can fire it at either one of those stages and then put glaze on top. And that way you have a pigment that's not going to move around. It's already stuck on there. And then the glaze goes on top of that, like a clear glaze. You want to put your clear glaze on top of it. That way you get a more predictable paint color. Then you have glaze. They come in all different kinds of shapes and, not shapes, but like different textures. They can get crawling glaze where it like crawls around and makes bumps and whatever you have it, like, you know, bumps and different weird shapes around your pot. You can get crystalline glaze. You can get celadon, which are more like a transparent, that glaze that kind of pools and comes darker in areas or not. So if you do a lot of carving, that looks really pretty. It breaks over the different spots and makes a nice clear part on one side and then pools in the carved out spots. You can get different effects with glazes, like metallic glazes, mirrored glazes, glazes that come in all different shapes and all different textures and colors. Glazes that almost look foamy or bumpy. I don't know, there's all kinds of different glazes. Glazes that drip intentionally, glazes that don't. You can make your own glazes. You can buy ingredients and like test out your own combinations of chemicals and develop your own glazes if you want. So those are all different things. You get mason stains. Mason stains are pigments, they're pigment powders, and then you can paint those on. You can airbrush them on. You can add them to glazes to change the color of your glaze and have a predictable color. So those are like predictable manufactured colorants, pigments. They're called mason stains. You can get overglazes. Those are glazes that you paint on top of glaze and then fire at a very low temperature. You can get lusters, so you get pearl luster, you can get a silver luster, you can get a gold luster, a white gold, or not silver, but like a white gold or a gold luster. Those are what you see on like fine china, where it's like gold on there. That's fired at a very, very, very low temperature. You can get decals or decals, whatever you call them, decals or decals. And then those are like usually water slide images that transfer on. And then when you fire it in the kiln, it like burns the pigment into the glaze. I know, right? All right, so I just realized again, I forgot to talk about the stages of clay terminology. So there is your plastic clay that comes out of the bag. Then there is greenware. Or sorry, I guess it'd be leather hard is next. So that way, that is when your clay dries. Your clay goes from wet to a slightly dry stage. It's not fully dry, but it's not fully wet either. It's called leather hard. It's nice and firm. Great time to do any fine, precise carving on your piece because it's not dried out. Now, when it's completely dry, we call that greenware. That means it's completely dry. We're not touching it, but it's also very fragile, so be very careful with it. Then you're going to fire it in your kiln to a low temperature, typically, depending on your process. Just for the very first firing, we want to get more firm so we can glaze on it without it dissolving, right? Because if you apply water to clay, it's going to turn into mud. So we don't want to do that. We can't glaze, well, you can. That's a whole other ball game. But typically we bisque fire, so that way we can get bisqueware out, which is clay that's been fired, but maybe not to temperature. It's in a ceramic form, so we can apply, we can stick it in a bucket, pull it out to get glaze on, right? We can pour glaze on it, we can paint glaze on it, we can airbrush glaze on it, we can spray glaze on it, and it's not going to turn into mud anymore because it's no longer clay. It has transformed into a ceramic state. And it's porous enough that it can absorb the glaze so that it embeds in the material and becomes one together. Whereas if you then fire it to full temperature, it comes out and it's in ceramic form, and now it's done, right? Once the glaze is on there, it's done. We are no longer touching it because it's no longer a porous surface to paint on. All right, I think that's it, my friends. Again, I'll link to the About the Cones episode below in the description of this video if you want to check that out. If you want any suggestions for ceramic supplies or tools, I will have links to those, my favorite recommendations, in the description of this video, so please make sure you check that out. And just know that they are Amazon affiliate links. That means I do get a commission should you purchase anything. Your next video to watch is how artists are using technology. You can watch that video by clicking the link above or in the description of that video, and I'll see you in that episode. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.